Yeah, can you guys all hear me okay? This is probably a lot easier. I just get feedback into the mic. Oh, really? Am I breaking everything? What's going on? It's working. It was working.
Just project. Okay, from this one.
Mic check, mic check.
It's all part of the
I'm not really here.
You're on the mic.
Oh, okay, there we go. Okay. And this is why you never do it live. Okay. Because we're good. We're just going to go with this. We've got 2 mics. We can share. Excellent. All right. Welcome, everybody, for coming. My name is Mark Panelists, and hope you guys enjoy this panel. I think you're going to love it. Just quickly start off, let everybody introduce themselves, and we'll get right into it. We'll start at the end.
Okay, I'm Tom George. I have a company called Apps in Toronto, and that Bitless was actually a follow-on to a previous company called Design Axiom, which did a lot of flash development, heavy flash development back in the day, and we saw some writing on the wall around 2011. So I'm not an early adopter, and actually, in fact, I had a friend who said to me, "Tom, you should be writing software for this new thing with an iPhone." I said, "Man, it's not going anywhere," because I'm really smart. And but 3 years later, customers were actually saying, "Well, you guys know, you guys do interactive animation," and that sort of pulled us into app development around 2011, 2012. So since then, I've been doing a lot of commercial apps for clients, and a couple on our own, my own, and one of which I think we've got a queued link for, which is it's a precious thing to me, but you can judge yourself. So that's my background in app development.
Let's go. Hi, I'm Jason Matthews. I've been in software for about 20 years now. Started out playing around with hardware. Did that for a little bit. Then I went into the back-end thing. Did that for a while. Then I did networking. Microsoft Certified Systems Administrator. I don't even know if they have that certification anymore. But and then I went into front-end development. Loved the web. Loved mobile. From when it was called WAP, or when they had those little devices that just like it's not smartphones, but prior to smartphones, they used to have web apps, sort of. And then when React Native came about, I was really gung-ho about it, jumped on the bandwagon. Jumped to my professional work. I worked with Razorfish for a while, developed the Walmart app, both iOS and Android, and subsequent to that, done some volunteer work, built some apps for one for Access Now, it's an app store on React Native, and on the side I also build apps on the side as well, and yeah, that's me.
Hey everybody, I'm Jean-Luc David. Hey!
He looks fair.
So I've been an app developer for a long time. Started out in web development, had my own little company. Probably the most notable thing I built was like a banner ad campaign for Jay-Z, so I'd get Rockefeller Records checks. So that was kind of cool. After that, I built a whole bunch of apps, mobile apps for a lot of companies like Yellow Pages, HBO, Disney, Netflix. So I started out writing apps in Objective-C in the early days, and I've evolved, and now I'm a Swift developer.
I guess I should give my quick intro too. My name is Mark Panelists. I'm VP of software at a company called Market Circle. I've been developing for Apple platforms since the web objects days. Prior to that, I was the co-founder and CTO, technical co-founder and CTO of a company called Flixel. And claim to fame there is the Apple Design Award-winning Simograph Pro. Continuing the reverse chronological, I did a bunch of other apps for other companies, for myself, consulting-wise. And my first app was an app that was ready to go on the store almost on the exact date of July 11th. Didn't get released for a little while because of all the legal things to just get an app on the store. But yeah, I was there from early days. That's our cue. What were you guys doing then on those early days of the App Store? Was it on the radar? Did you know about it? Did you care about it? And we'll use that as a jumping point from there.
Well, just very quickly, I worked at Microsoft, and once I saw Steve Jobs on stage revealing the iPhone, I ran to an Apple store, and I bought a Mac Mini and an iPod Touch, and basically the Apple employees were making fun of me because they knew I was from Microsoft. But that was my beginnings.
I think I was in Jamaica on the beach when it was released. At the time, I think I was using a BlackBerry. So I knew about it, but I wasn't one to jump on it right away.
So in that time, I was still heavily into Flash application development. So we were sort of aware of things because Macromedia and Adobe were trying to push Flash onto mobile devices. And so we'd done some very sad experiments on things like a Nokia 8580 or something. And it looked awful. So in some regard, the mobile wasn't on my radar at that point. And we thought that Flash, if it became powerful enough to handle something, that Flash would migrate its way onto these platforms, which was both wrong, but at the same time, it wasn't the worst thing for us. So.
Like Jean-Luc, you've covered that, but for the rest of you guys, what was the first app you built and what time frame? Just kind of benchmarking for everybody in terms of your experience.
In 2012, we got a tap, and I don't even know how this happened, but the home buyers who used to supply all the information for the Toronto Star home buyers section got in touch with us and said, "Do you do iPhone with?" And we were just starting. We'd actually put a course together for our ActionScript developers, and none of whom had computer science degrees, and so we're teaching them how to do Objective-C. And this guy, I think we'd done some Flash work for him, says, "Do you guys do this thing?" I'm like, yeah, we do that. And because I'm a consultant, and that's what we do. And actually, that went quite well. So
sorry to interrupt, but if you're paying us, yeah,
we're doing that. Our designers seem to have a real knack for it, and the app went quite well from my point of view. And everybody was on a huge learning curve, and the app was in the store for several years, I think. So it actually aged well, and it still had all the skeuomorphic graphics when it shouldn't have had, but they didn't want to update it. So.
My first app was more of an experiment. It was an app marrying my love for hardware and software. Basically, it was a chair that we had installed sensors in, and it would detect how long you were sitting. And if you're sitting for too long, it would notify you. Called it smartass. And so it would send a signal to our backend server that would send a signal, notification to the app, and it would remind you to get up. Have these cute little hearts that were turned upside down to look like butts, and you'd lose butts as you sit longer.
How did you get through App Store review?
We did.
Came in right after the fart app.
My first app was actually a facial recognition app in 2011. It was an app called Cardigan, and essentially it allowed you to take a picture of someone's face and get their contact information. So it was meant to replace business cards. We got featured on CNN, got 80,000 users in a week. We got banned in Germany for privacy laws. And what else? Oh, and one of the highlights was going to a tech conference and giving away Twinkies to get people to install the app.
All right, enough about your apps. What apps do you admire most? What would you say is your favorite app that's available either in the past or that exists today?
My current favorite app is Flip because it's so practical and useful. I use it every weekend to price match.
It's hard to say.
So local, okay, Toronto company.
Yeah. I love great UI. And when I think favorite app, actually, it brings me back to the iPad. The iPad was just released. There's this app, I can't remember what it's called, but it's a travel app. And the experience and the gestures that it had was so beautiful. I'd say it's my favorite. It's not what I use mostly, but it would be my favorite. But right now, the app that I use mostly is probably WhatsApp. I use it all the time. I think it's great.
My favorite app right now is something called Flight Radar 24. I'm a bit of an aviation nut. So I got introduced to Flight Radar 24. I was doing work with Cisco in London, and their office has this beautiful rooftop cafeteria, and you look out over Heathrow Airport. And the guy opens it up and he says, watch this. And he holds it up, and it's a camera view of a plane taking off. And then then suddenly, bloop, this little thing appears. Oh, it's a British Airways 747. It's heading to Rio de Janeiro. And then another plane goes off in the background, and it followed it along. And I found out this app and this company, they use ACARS data, so all this stuff that gets broadcast, and they pick it up and they centralize it. And if you ever see these sort of animated, what all the planes are doing today, they have everything in the whole world. And so, but the app is amazing because it's actually got a really bad UI, but it's so darn useful and interesting if you're a fan. It's really compelling. And when I show people that, that's when they go, oh, this phone is really powerful, right? So that's my favorite app right now.
Any apps that you really dislike?
Contacts. I mean, that thing should be killed, right?
Tell me how you really feel.
Actually, fortunately, there's a replacement for contacts. A company called Fantastical does calendar and contact replacements for it.
So one of the things that I like about the web is how open it is, which is kind of contrast to Apple, right? And I like reading ebooks, and so I started off using the Apple platform, and I realized that I can't bring my books anywhere else. So I hate anything to do with tying me into the platform, like the Apple bookstore. I hate that.
I have a surprising one. I hate MyFitnessPal. And the reason being is because it's a kitchen sink app. There's just so much going on in that app. And one of Apple's philosophies for the App Store, I applied to become a manager of the App Store here in Canada. And their main philosophy is do one thing and do it well. And I've applied that philosophy to apps, and I love apps that do that.
All right, now we're going to get to a topic that I'm sure everybody has been asking themselves. It's about monetization on the App Store. So the App Store started with only free apps and only paid apps. We saw this progression from that to allowing free apps with in-app purchase and now subscriptions. And there are a lot of varying opinions about that. And curious to see what yours are.
There are actually 4 ways to make money off of apps. The first one is advertising. The second one is in-app purchases and subscriptions. The third is to actually sell stuff through apps. And the fourth is to get acquired and make money off the app. That's it.
So the apps that I've been involved with, the biggest one is the Walmart app. And for them, it's just purchasing through the app. So that kind of bypass some of the profit sharing aspects of it.
We did a lot of work with game development companies here in Toronto, GANs in particular. So we weren't intimately involved in the business end of it, but we got to hear a little bit about how they were earning money, and that was a sort of a Farmville kind of game. And so you had to buy, you got a little bit of leeway, and then you had to buy your way into making these beautiful, crazy webkit cities. And I think that's it's kind of a hard road to hoe, that thing. I think if you're a Zynga, it all worked really well. And I think it was challenging to get too many people. Like, it looked like they had a good steady stream, but it was pretty challenging. In our own app that we did, which was the typewriter, I think by the time we were sort of putting it to rest, it was generating 1 latte a month from in-app purchases and stuff. And we tried advertising, but it's you have to really, I think, anticipate this stuff before you build the app to some degree. So that was kind of a lesson learned. A lot of my clients were clients like Cisco that were just doing things to send them to CES and stuff like that. So there was no business model involved. But I think the one thing I want to try next is almost kind of like begware. It's like, please pay us some money, because I think there's that friction. You want to just get over that friction, and and people might like using your app, but they feel a little guilty that it's free, and we used to call that shareware, where you just pay $10 to use someone's app. And I'd like to see how that goes in the next one of builds.
I have too many stories about this. I don't know what kind of appetite there is in the room for this. Oh boy. I'm supposed to be moderated and not talking too much. But I'll just give you a couple just for some color. First monetization that I added into an app was for the company across the street, Kobo, when it was short covers in the first version. And it was being able to buy the books in app. You could do that. Apple rejected it. Didn't tell anybody why. So then figured out a clever URL scheme to bounce out to be able to buy outside the store and then come back into the app. And that finally got approved. And then, so that was okay. There's initial barriers to staying outside of the ecosystem, so you'll learn your lessons from that. You stay within the ecosystem in terms of doing all of that. Early on, identified the subscriptions are the way things are going, so being able to do that. And there were a number of hoops that you needed to jump through in order to be able to do subscriptions in the store. Those have gotten a lot easier, and in fact, that is Apple's recommended way of doing purchases now. So if you're hoping to be able to release an app and have upgrades, upgrade pricing, all of those things, they're never going to come. They expect to be able to do subscriptions, and that's even where they're going with their own apps, if you haven't seen that part. So if you're releasing a new app, expect to do subscriptions. And if you're a consumer, expect that you're going to see more and more apps on subscriptions. I'll take it off on a bit of a tangent. To skew or not to skew? I miss you, Scott.
We're talking about skeuomorphic UI.
So we've now had we first had 6 years of the skeuomorphic design and an interface that you felt like you could touch. And now we've had 7 years of this flattened post Scott Forstall, Johnny Ive flattenification of the platform. Which one was better, and where are we going to next?
I like Skew. It had an appeal, like going to an arcade or something like that. On the other hand, it was kind of very constrained, and I actually think Flat has a lot of disadvantages. I can never know what is a button or not. But what it's happened is it's allowed, or whether or not it allowed, companies like Snapchat just said, screw it all. Gestures, standardize this or that. We're going to have our own interface. And the weirder it was, the more their target audience liked it, mostly teenagers. And the more harder it was for parents to get into it, to see anything. They even liked it better. But out of that has come a whole bunch of apps that have, I think they've actually improved the UI, because I think some of that was very constrained. And now, myself, I find, just the single thumb gesture, which usually does something useful, you just have to try it about 8 times. I actually kind of like that. So I find, if designers have a interest in creating something that's not necessarily what's already out there, and if it's, Flat has kind of enabled that, but I don't love Flat for its own sake, but I like the fact that it's sort of a Wild West again. And people say, oh, you standardized elements, so I was like, yeah, I don't know. If you think it's going to fly and your audience is going to dig it, I think it's the way to go.
So I really liked the skeuomorphic design when it was available, but my first foray into transforming from that was the introduction of Windows Phone. So Windows Phone came out and they started what's called the Metro design, and that was pretty flat. And I tried to develop an app for Windows Phone. It was a clone of the CIBC app, so I went through the entire CIBC app and created experiences that mirrored it, but with a flat UI. And it looked really, really good. And then a year or two after, Apple came out with a flat design. One of the things that I've noticed with the flat design from a UX point of view is that because of what you said about the users not knowing what to touch, like almost anything on the screen should respond to the user. So you might have an element, if the user touches it, it should do something, it should respond to the user in such a way, like the user expects it to respond to them in some way. So that kind of increase your UX spend, I guess, because of the flat design. But users have become used to it. you see my parents using phones all the time, and they just touch everything, and great apps actually respond to them in almost anything that they touch.
I'm going to say something controversial. I think Apple copied Android. Skeuomorphic, the great thing about it is that you looked at a camera, it looked like a camera, you knew how to use it. It was very usable because it mirrored the real world. And I think that we've transitioned into flat, but you still need to have those considerations in terms of usability and just make sure the app is intuitive and the icons, say what they're supposed to do, and you kind of have a good sense of what the app's supposed to be. And no matter what design style you use, as long as it's usable, it's great.
To your opening comment, great artist. Maybe use this as an opportunity to open it up. Is there any questions from the crowd? Everybody's been quiet. Hopefully we've been informing you. But yeah, there are a few. So.
I thought I'd read somewhere that there's a new skeuomorphic 2.0 where this device is like where the light is and it's going to show the shadow on the buttons and stuff. I guess like coming up with this new technology for me to already guess.
Sounds good.
Used to be, I don't know, anybody? So just to repeat the question, a skeuomorphic 2.0 that interacts with the physical world, so depending on the actual light source, instead of it just being a single light source, that you assume that the single light source can put all your shadows based on what was assumed to be on the screen, it actually uses the sensors in the device to reflect what is actually going on, so it gives you that real world reflection of the space. That'd be cool.
I actually build stuff with parallax a lot, so you have live video and you can actually move inside the video, and my splash pages all have that. So it's not quite skeuomorphic, but that's it.
There's another hand up in the back, go ahead.
What do you think is the future of apps? Will it continue to be getting more apps downloaded from App Stores and kind of populating user screens, or will there be some easier way to gain new apps and get rid of old apps? Because at the end of the day, apps are competing not just with the competitive apps, but also comparable apps, and they're all fighting for the same storage on the device.
I think what
Sorry, just before, did everybody hear that? Do I need to summarize the question?
Yeah, so I actually have it's an interesting idea, and I think Android actually had a bit of that, where your app wasn't necessarily this big sovereign thing that came in every time. You could have intents that were launched as part of other screens, put into dashboards. And iOS has always kept you, for the most part, in your window, and it does become irritating having to flip to do something small to answer they do have parts of it now that'll pop up in your notification screen, but it hasn't been a central theme of app development. And there's a problem. Part of the problem is, I think, if you're an app developer, just that some nice part of your app gets subsumed into somebody else's screen, might be a little worrisome. As a user, I would kind of welcome it, but it all depends, I guess, on the app. But I think I don't know about managing your apps, like getting rid of the old ones. I'm pretty good at getting rid of the old ones. But I like the idea of sometimes I find that it'd be interesting if you didn't have to swipe over and launch the app and get that thing just to look up the one thing you're going after.
There's been research done, and actually people don't delete apps as often as we think they do. If they have space issues, then they'll try to clean up. But other than that, people download them and keep them, not use them, just use the same 5 apps every day. So, I mean, if there's something that could help you clean up, that would be cool. But as far as I see it, it's probably just going to be clutter all day.
I see a lot of companies moving away from cross-platform app development. What do you think about this whole topic?
Can you wait about 5 minutes? Thanks.
we have a big thing.
Okay, we'll skip to that one. To native or not to native?
So I've worked with companies who try to do cross-platform, build libraries that work on both Android and iOS, use React Native and all kinds of different tactics. Ultimately, like even React Native, it's very webby, and it doesn't really feel native. And ultimately the user experience is what's important. So if you're building an app that's super simple, it's just to navigate screens and just to show a map or something, then it's fine. But if you want to build a really rich experience within the application, I think native is the way to go. And that's why companies are going that direction.
I tend to disagree. So that problem, it does exist. And the reason why it exists is because of the people who are involved. So you have designers who are used to the web, and they're using the same vernacular as they would on the web. They don't understand gestures and all the richness that app platforms give, and you get in React Native as well. And then you have people coming from the web or web developers who also don't understand the platform. So the tools are there, but they're not leveraging the tools the way they should be used. And so you get this experience that is not quite native, even though you have the power to do it. So I wouldn't blame the platform, I blame the people involved in delivering that experience. So I've seen great apps done in React Native. There's a guy on the web, I can't remember his name, but he has this hashtag, can it be done in React Native? You can look him up on Twitter. And what he does, he takes like pure native experiences and do it in React Native, and you can't tell the difference. And but it goes down to understanding gestures, understanding how the mobile platform works, because it's different from the web, and it's much, much more powerful and rich. And once you leverage those things, you will get a true native experience.
So I can just summarize, the React Native developer is advocating for native development.
I am, yeah. Native is, I mean, unless you have a budget constraint, I think you should go pure native. But if you have a budget constraint, you can leverage React Native to create an experience that you can use on Android and iOS, and you can leverage your existing engineers. iOS engineers is harder to come by than a JavaScript engineer. So for business reasons, it makes sense.
Yeah, I think that summarizes it really well. If your motivation is mostly business motivated, then you want to use the platform that is able to reach the furthest. But if you want to provide the richest experience on the platform, you want to build a native app and use the power of all of the tools that are there and be able to deliver that experience that surprises and delights that you could only do if you're building with the native toolset.
Yeah, I mean, one of the portable platforms is Xamarin, which, I've actually done 3 Xamarin projects, and I think there's nothing technical about Xamarin that stops you from achieving native results, because it literally is the same model, but in the C# language. And whereas there is a thin layer of binding and translation, and it does cost you. It can cost you some sluggishness and performance. The issue that happens, I think, it goes to people, and I don't blame designers for this, because I think designers sit there crying when they're made to do this. But the Xamarin, it comes with a culture, which is usually a .NET shop that's getting really ambitious and it's going to build an app. And so I actually worked on a project where there was a .NET shop working for their client, and so their whole approach and architecture was, they were mostly interested in the technology and using .NET patterns, and the idea that that the designer was the most important. To me, the designer is the most important guy in the room when it comes to making decisions about how the thing should work. And so all these compromises came down because we were doing it the Xamarin way. So it wasn't Xamarin per se that got in the way. And I've looked up, I've done some looking into React. It looks great, and it's compiled too. But I've got my other comment is, the tool set is, to some degree, Xcode and the tools that Apple have given us can be brittle enough on a good day sometimes. And then if you add that and the other layer and the tools, and you get some kind of glitch, you're kind of in a no man's land where no one can help you. And I think that's a thing that's hard to go away, because those tools are always pushing the boundaries of what they're doing, and you can end up with issues that are just really hard to work with. But I think that there's, you have that uncanny valley thing where the tool subtly changes the UI. I think you could have managed to create portability. The reason you're doing portability is because there's probably an edict, we're going to have the same code base, and I don't think it ever quite works out that way. So for that reason, I recommend I would go native as much as possible. But I think a smart dev shop can make it work to a large degree that people don't really know. So.
Right, so I'm gonna combine, just because we're a little bit short on time, a couple of topics here. So one, Apple has always been the masters of planning the long game. And you can see things that are added to the OSs, they come to fruition years later. Good examples is GCP adding in extra CPUs into the devices, auto layout with all the different layouts that the devices have. All kinds of different technologies are years in advance. Even Swift and Swift UI this year, right? The basis of Swift UI started way back then, 5 years ago, and we're only seeing it today. So there's a lot of ways that Apple plans things out over the long term. So one of the things that we saw last year at WWDC was Air Force One, Craig Federighi, stood up on stage and said, no, we are not combining, we're not merging iOS and macOS. And then this year, Apple introduces, which on the surface is mostly just marketing, iPadOS. So what is that a signal to us? That's what is going to be iPadOS.
Well, first of all, if you look at the underlying libraries, you can write a Mac OS app using the same kits as you would an iOS app. So, okay,
I'm not even talking about Catalyst.
No.
A whole other thing.
I don't know.
But
what's interesting is if they go that direction, they're basically mimicking Microsoft. They're going to have to make their Macs, touch friendly, and instead of a touch bar, you'll have the touch screen and kind of play into that because I'd say iOS doesn't really support keyboards as well, the physical keyboard presence. It's really designed for touch, and the other one's more designed for physical keyboards, so it would be very interesting.
One of the reasons that they killed off Flash was because they said Flash was not meant to be on a mobile platform, because Flash is meant to be used with a keyboard and a mouse. And the mobile platform is meant to be used with your fingers and gestures. Are they going back?
the biggest thing about Flash was that it just ate your battery.
Yeah, that too. That too. But I agree with you that Microsoft has done this. Again, taking a page out of Microsoft book, but they're probably going to be more successful than Microsoft at it.
I don't see it because in some ways I think macOS is almost suffering from a lack of attention anyways. You could have a Mac Air from 4 years ago, and apart from a little power, really not much is changing. And I know it is, and it gets better, but I don't see, I think a lot of people are not going to have a laptop or a desktop in a while. People who, you can see kids and your parents, if they're old enough, do quite fine on an iPad. They don't, but creators like a laptop. So are they just going to merge it? I don't see the benefit. I think it might actually atrophy to the point where they don't, 10, 20 years from now. But I wouldn't say a merge. I wouldn't see a merge.
Yeah, I guess to add some color for the crowd there, I'm in the same camp where we see where the Mac is going, and the Mac is going where the Mac Pro is going. It's going upstream, upmarket. It's for the pros. It's for those systems where you need a Mac Pro to do this amazing work with, but it's not for everybody. And iPadOS is not a merging of the two. It's more cherry picking the best pieces of iOS and macOS to be what's that next platform that most people are going to be using for productivity work, and not that mobile experience on the go.
Yeah.
All right, last few minutes. App Store reviews. App Store review stories, horror stories, good stories, anybody?
Well, one of the benefits early with platforms like React Native was tools like Code Push. And what Code Push is a platform or a tool that enables you to update your app over the air. So you didn't have to go through all the review process again. Once you release it once, you can use Code Push to bypass that process and have your app update automatically over the air. today, app reviews are much faster than back in the day, so not as much need for it. But if you want to do something in a pinch, people still have code push for those reasons.
Just for some context, App Store reviews used to take at least 7 days, sometimes more than that. And then if you got rejected, you had to fix whatever was rejected and go through that 7-day cycle once again. Now it's down to sometimes just hours.
What might not be well known is that Steve Jobs initially didn't want an app store. He wanted to control all the apps himself. And it was his team that convinced him to say, no, we should let third-party developers release apps. And so Steve actually bought into it and said, okay, and it became successful. But that culture of trying to control the platform has always been there and will continue to be, I think. What's interesting, there was a point in time when people figured out that just by buying installs, you could actually get to the top 10. And fart apps were ending up in the top 10, and it was embarrassing Apple. And so they ended up initiating a quality and quantity type of quantitative measure of whether an app should be there. So I guess, that's my story.
All right, so we've touched on why everybody started developing on the platform. Why do you continue to develop on the platform?
Well, when I started developing on iOS, it was on Objective-C, and it was one of the most painful things to learn. It was definitely not user-friendly. And having gone through the hump of learning Objective-C, then I began to enjoy the process, and it became super cool. Now there's the advantage of Swift. I think Swift was designed to bring in JavaScript developers and Java developers into iOS development. It's a lot more fun and easy to build apps now. So that's why I'm here.
I think Apple is doing a really good job in listening to developers. I think they're listening to JavaScript developers actually. So things like Swift UI just came out, and it looks very much like React. It's very declarative, and it looks beautiful. And Swift is also beautiful, and it just looks just like JavaScript for the most part. And so I think it's much more approachable, and as a result, I think it's just going to continue to get more and more popular.
JavaScript, but with TypeScript.
I'm not sure that things. I'm on the Apple platform because I like the reach, right? It's one of the things the web had, was this amazing reach. If you started back in the 90s, it was just unbelievable. You could publish something and a million people could see it if it was so amazing. And so if you want the shortest and most powerful route to create interactive and software, whatever your goals are, the App Store is, and iOS in particular, over even Android, is the place, I think, where you work to get that out to people who are going to use your software. So for that reason, to me, it's where the heat and the light is, and that's where I want to be.
I meant to ask this earlier on, but is show of hands, who develops for iOS? Who wants to? Who's interested in doing this? And right on. So I guess the next question is,
You don't have to choose.
is it too late to become an iOS developer?
No, I mean, this is going to go on for a while, but also I think, in 2012, I took a team of 12 ActionScript, JavaScript web developers who mostly had Humber college diplomas or Sheridan diplomas, and we turned them into Objective-C coders. And the only terrible surprise for them was Dialog. And we created a training wheels framework for them. So we actually had a class called Movie Clip, so they could sort of work with that. And the skill sets that they brought to it were they had a background in graphic design. They knew Photoshop and Illustrator, so they could do all their own production graphics, and they turned into a superb team. And I think having JavaScript actually had a similar object model to Objective-C in the sense that it was all loosely bound and terrifying as it ran. And that translated well into the way they could work with it. And the object model was actually much closer than, say, even React, or something like that. So I think if you have an inclination, I think the tools are good, the websites for training are really good, and I think the outlook for employment and the influence of the platform is really high.
I do agree. Even with React Native, some of the best React Native developers actually are Objective-C and Swift developers. Because those guys, like I said before, understand the platform, understand the powers of the platform, and they can actually contribute well. So if you want to do React Native, I think you should still jump into Swift, still jump into those things, because if there's something that is not built into React Native, you can always build it and import it. And so you have the same capabilities there.
There's some people that feel like every app's been built and there's no reason to, actually become an app developer, but that's not true. There's 3 things you can do. You can either improve on an app that's already existing, you can create a brand new app, a new thing that's never been seen before, or you can take processes that are old and antiquated and modernize them and put them into apps. So there's a lot of opportunity, and there's still a lot of stuff that hasn't been done yet. I have friends who are building apps for the construction industry, and there are many apps that are starting to come out, but it's still the Wild West and a great opportunity for people.
All right, before I ask the last question for the panel, I just wanted to open up to the crowd again. Does anybody have any questions? Or any questions?
How do you handle updating apps that are already live? Particularly like something that might have been sitting on the shelf for a while.
You mean apps that haven't been updated for a long time?
Yeah.
So the question was, how do you update apps, especially with apps that haven't been updated for a while?
You just do.
To the consultants on the panel, I think this is a motivating question.
You take a week off.
Lock yourself. Or after.
Both. Lock yourself in a room and go through all the errors that you're going to face. You're going to face a lot of them, especially with React Native, but you just have to get through them.
Yeah, we had one app and it languished for a long time, and then by the time we were getting warnings that they were going to delist it. It was like, this is all Objective-C. This is hundreds or thousands of lines of Objective-C. It's not happening, so there was a decision made to kill that app. I helped a client through Objective-C to Swift 2, 3, and honestly, that was very painful. There's the usual issues like your API might have changed, you've got to update, you've got data on board, you have to update, so that's just normal delivery. But Apple has, they've accelerated the pace at which they're improving the platform. Somebody asked me a question, well, if you're building a camera app, which would you use? And I was like, you use the good old AV Foundation. And it's like, no, that's deprecated. Oh, I didn't know that. Last time I looked, I was maintaining somebody's AV Foundation code. And it's a little bit challenging. And I think the issue is just trying to do it as often as possible if it's a live app, because as smooth, as long as you wait a year or two, it's just a, yeah.
Yeah, I'd say if depending on how old it is, just retire the dead, build the Swift UI,
just kill it right.
It's gone. You might as well start over. All right. So when the iPhone was first announced, Steve Jobs said it was 3 things. It was a phone, an iPod, and an internet communicator. Phone, an iPod, and internet communicator. No, he had to repeat it twice because people are reacting. Sorry, we should play that. So, using that as an awful segue to the question, it is, what are the 3 things that need to come to the platform? Should you be in charge of deciding said things?
Okay, so I actually read that question as what 3 things would you address, and my first one is autocorrect, because not ever have I meant dumping. Right? So autocorrect kills me, and it's like one of these things that it actually materially compromises my experience, because And I don't know, if I'm talking to someone who's 20 years younger than me, I get off one line of protest and I get a 2-paragraph response, and I go, I don't know how you're doing it, but it's bad for me. And Siri isn't help. So autocorrect and Siri are two of my pain points. And that Siri, it's a hard problem. It's not that they're stupid. It's not that they don't care, but it works if you're doing it in a quiet room. You go, oh, this is very useful. And then you're in your car and you're saying, Siri, I'd like to text somebody. And by the time I finished trying to get my first Siri text off, I drove through a red light. And I thought, well, thank God for hands-free. And I got to the side of the road and wiped the sweat off me and thought, that just isn't working. And I feel like that really hasn't improved much since then. So Siri and autocorrect drive me nuts. And I want them both to work really much better. And the third thing, I forget, because now I can't remember my third thing. I had it up.
I have only one thing. I wish Apple was a little bit more open. They have done that with the App Store, and that has been tremendous for them. And I think being a little bit more open, I think things like AirPlay should be open. Their own platform, I think that should be a little bit more open. I think they're making changes to that actually to make it easier to develop for.
Yeah, the lack of adoption of HomeKit-enabled apps. Really.
That kind of force their hand.
That
kind of force their hand. But yeah, that I'd love to see them be a little bit more open.
So there's some positive changes in that respect.
I personally think Apple is kind of lagging in terms of their product development. So initially when Steve Jobs was there, hey, iPads, iPhones, all kinds of new stuff. And now it's just, oh, here's a new version of the iPhone. And I'd love to see maybe, like a Siri in your pocket type of phone where you don't actually have the phone, you just talk to like a Jarvis-like interface and you just better AI and able to interact with it and just have new kinds of ways of interacting with technology.
So the advances that Apple has done in terms of AR on device is not a sign of things to come for the platform?
It could be, but you're still stuck on that little screen, and there's so much more you can do.
Indeed. Look at that, right on time. Well done, guys. So if there isn't any other questions from the crowd, thank you everybody for all of your attention and questions from the crowd, and I'll turn it back over.